Your parents swore that if you just got good grades, landed a steady job, and saved 10%, that you'd be on easy street when you got to your retirement years. Does that sound familiar? So how come you're 28, maybe even 38, heck, maybe even 48, still renting, watching your 401k yo-yo while your dad's house has tripled in value? It's not just you. The rules of the game have changed, but the playbook most of us got just doesn't work anymore. Well, if that's you, still stuck in 1984, today we're not just going to rip up the boomer playbook, so to speak. We're going to rewrite the rules for 2025 and beyond because the economy your parents navigated simply doesn't exist anymore. A lot of things have changed, and so we're going to address some of that today. So let's talk about really the first one, the college promise, right? The old rule, and I'm sure many of you have heard it, is that if you go to school, get a good education, then you're going to get a great job. You're going to get a bigger paycheck because you have a college degree. And therefore, your life will be on easy street, so to speak. Well, reality check. Let's be honest. The college promise, and nothing against college. I'm a college grad. I don't belabor or bemoan anybody going to college. I think it's great. But it was a cornerstone of the American dream for decades, right? You went to school, you got your degree, you worked hard, and you were expecting this comfortable life maybe. But for many of us, that promise kind of seems hollow now, doesn't it? Well, while wages for college educated workers have risen since the 80s, progress has really slowed significantly since about the year 2000. Okay, so since 1990 alone, the cost of attending a public four-year university has increased over 66%. So the parchment paper that used to be your golden ticket, so to speak, the thing that often doubled your income if you had it in your back pocket, now more often than not, it basically just doubles your debt. And your income is about the same. It's a classic case of a good idea gone sideways, and it's been fueled by a generation that perhaps didn't fully grasp the escalating cost of that sure thing, so to speak. Now, the new rule is, treat tuition like any other investment. You need to calculate the ROI before you sign on the dotted line. And it's not about shunning education or thinking that's bad. It's about being smart about your education. And before you commit to 4 years and potentially 6 figures of debt, you need to run the numbers and think of it as a business decision, not an emotional decision, or not a generational decision. There can be a lot of excitement built up around, hey, there's a lot of, let's say, first generation college graduate type people. Nobody in their family's ever been to college or graduated from college. And that can be exciting, and it can be a sense of accomplishment, and honestly, a great thing in terms of trying to achieve a goal in one's life. But if it lands you in a mountain of debt, 6 figures worth, that you're going to basically have to eat for the rest of your life, you really need to evaluate that in a very good way. So 2 quick filters to maybe avoid a world of pain is, will your total student loan debt realistically stay under your expected first year salary? Meaning, if your loans are going to be more than you're going to make in the initial first year, you're already starting behind the 8 ball. And so you need to kind of think through the ramifications of that. Does the school's 4-year graduation rate top 70%? Because every extra semester or year that you spend means more tuition, more interest on the loans, and less time earning in terms of working and paying for those things. And if either answer here is no, don't necessarily despair. There's other options. Community colleges, there's trade schools, paid apprenticeships. These aren't just viable alternatives. They often beat borrowing 50 grand for a fuzzy liberal arts major that quite frankly is not going to provide any income once you graduate, because jobs are pretty much non-existent. And again, I have a daughter with a liberal arts degree. Nothing wrong with a liberal arts degree. Now, the other thing is the 9-to-5 safety net. Okay, so the old rule was, hey, keep your head down. The pension that you'll get from your corporate job will take care of you one day. Well, again, reality check here. The good old days of corporate loyalty and guaranteed retirement, well, for your parents, that was a steady 9 to 5. It came with a golden parachute when they retired. And if I take, for example, in 1980, nearly 60% of private sector workers had a pension. And today that number has plummeted to under 15%. So what happened, right? Well, companies realized that defined benefit plans, which is what a pension is called, they're expensive. And the financial landscape shifted. And so your parents' HR department actively funded their retirement. Yours probably just funds your coffee breaks. Okay, unfortunately. The idea of a single lifelong employer providing you with in your golden years is largely a relic of the past. There's just very few companies out there that do it anymore. So relying solely on that traditional path now is kind of like bringing a flip phone to a smartphone fight. Okay, it's just kind of old news. So what's the new rule? Well, build your portfolio career, if you will, before you need it. This isn't just about having a side hustle. It's about diversifying your income streams and your skill sets. So carve out 10 hours a week, maybe even just 5, to develop a monetizable skill. Maybe it's computer coding or graphic design or copywriting or social media management, whatever it may be. Lord knows we pay our social media managers a pretty good living. So, hey, what's your side hustle? That was for my guy running my video here. So I like to gig him every now and then. Anyways, so really anything you can sell on a marketplace and directly to clients. So it's not just a hobby, it's your personal economic insurance policy. Think of it that way. Once that side hustle starts earning even, let's say, $300 a month, if you're shoveling every dime into a Roth, after tax considerations and so forth, compounded at a conservative 8%, that $300 a month becomes a whopping $343,000 tax-free by the time you're 60 years of age. So, job security, as your parents knew it, is dead. Income security, however, is very much alive, and it looks like having 3, let's say, unrelated clients that you can't fire, excuse me, it looks like if you have 3 unrelated clients who can fire you and you'd still eat comfortably, right? So you want to think about it in terms of having that safety net, if you will. It's about building robust financial ecosystems around yourself and not just relying on single, increasingly fragile corporate trees to try to take care of your entire life. A lot more of that is on our shoulders as individuals in our day and time. So what about buying a house, right? Buying a house like ASAP, soon as possible. Well, the old rule was renting. Why rent? You're just throwing away money. The reality check is that this mantra has really been drilled into us, like the American dream is to own a home. And look, to a large degree, I agree with that. And I like homeownership, obviously, but it's been drilled into us for generations, right? The idea that every rent payment is basically just cash down the drain. That's kind of the mentality of, look, go buy a house. You're throwing your money away if you rent. Well, in a different economic era, there was certainly some truth to that. The median U.S. home price in 1980 was about $65,000, and the average mortgage rate hovered around 14%. And even with that high mortgage rate, monthly payments in today's dollars was roughly $1,500. If I fast forward to today, the median home price is over $400,000. So if you run that same calculation, and you're looking at $3,700 a month, and that's before property taxes, insurance, your HVAC blowing up, those other kind of costs, you're talking about some considerable changes in the math. And so what was once a relatively accessible step to building wealth can now be kind of a financial trap, particularly in overheated markets like we're seeing today. Now, so what's maybe the new rule? Maybe buy only when the 531 test passes. And this isn't about saying homeownership is bad. It's about being strategic and avoiding being house poor. So here's the test. 5% down max, which can be difficult for a lot of people, right? But a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll essentially drain their savings to make a down payment on a home. that's kind of a terrible trade-off. Sometimes, right? I mean, obviously everything is kind of case specific, but you need to make sure that the amount of savings, that you're not blowing up your emergency fund, your savings funds, to go buy an illiquid asset. Okay. The other thing along those lines is you need to have at least 3 months worth of expenses or cash reserves left over after closing, because life happens and homes are expensive, even new ones. Okay. The third I would say is just a purchase price that's under 100 times your monthly rent or payment. It's basically just a rough measure of whether it's actually more affordable to buy than rent in your market. Okay. So, really kind of basic high level test, not applicable in all situations, but really what I'm trying to basically get you to understand is that although buying a home, we've said it's the American dream, a lot of times it's the American trap. And once you're in the rat race, so to speak, once you're in the hamster wheel, it's very difficult to get yourself out, at least in a profitable manner. So until then, you can invest the difference between your current rent and what a mortgage would cost you in a low cost, let's say, index fund. Seriously, 10 years of renting plus consistently investing that, let's say saved $2,000 a month, historically outperforms forced appreciation in most coastal and even inland markets. So your parents' house was often a nest egg, a relatively safe bet for appreciation. Today, your house can very quickly become a noose if the timing and mobility dictates that you need to move, or if you're financially stretched too thin. It's really about, freedom, not just owning a piece of dirt. So keep that in mind. So this brings us to the next thing that your parents never told you about money, and that is the concept that all debt is evil, right? So the old rule is, Dave Ramsey, if you can't pay cash for it, you can't afford it. No offense to Dave Ramsey, great guy. He and I just disagree on a few things. But this one really is deeply ingrained, isn't it? It's the idea that all debt is inherently bad. It's a sign of irresponsibility. And again, in a certain economic context, this rule kind of made sense, this old rule. The mantra really worked beautifully in a double-digit savings account world. Like in 1984, some CD and savings rates were in the double digits, right? With 6-month CDs that were under 11%, and some savings accounts were paying as high as 8%. And today you're lucky, if you can get 0.5% in some savings accounts. So, meanwhile, inflation is a relentless beast, chewing at 3% or more annually. Every dollar you hoard in a low interest savings account is actually losing purchasing power. So the idea of paying cash for everything might feel virtuous and make you feel better, because obviously debt can be a burden. It can be a weight that's on you. But it's often financially suboptimal in our current low interest, high inflation environment. So it's really a missed opportunity to leverage capital wisely. So what's the new rule? Well, separate cash flow debt from consumption debt. This is a critical distinction that your parents might not have ever explained, because the financial products that they encountered were different. If the interest rate is below your expected after-tax return on investment and the asset you're acquiring actually generates income or appreciates, think of like a rental property financed at 4% fixed, or a business loan that grows your revenue by 20%, that's very good debt. It puts money in your pocket and at least helps you build wealth. On the flip side, credit card balances that are 19%, I've even seen them as high as 30%. Well, that's pure consumption debt, and it's financially toxic, right? Napalm those balances as quick as you can with every available dollar. And, that's the stuff that really does pull you down. That's a debt that you don't want. But good debt actually helps you build. Bad debts just basically take money out of your pocket every single month. So learn that difference once, internalize it, and you'll profit forever. If you go study the wealthy, we'll call it, most of them never use their own money to build their wealth. They use this concept of good debt. that desire can be different for everyone, but there is a difference between good and bad debt. I like to put it like this. Good debt is something that someone else is paying for. So if you think of a rental house, if you own one and you have a mortgage on that home, you used a minimal cash outlay to buy the home. You've rented the home that provides cash flow. Your home is building an equity and someone else is paying your debt. That's a good debt. Credit cards, not so much. Stay away. So it's not about avoiding debt entirely. It's about using debt as a tool and not a trap. So on to the next point. What about the concept of saving your way to wealth, right? This old rule that said, save 10% and you'll be a millionaire by the time you retire, all those kind of things. Well, this was the classic advice, right? The simple, consistent savings plan worked for many, but let's kind of look at the numbers today. At today's median personal income of around $50,000 a year, saving 10% for 40 years grows to about $1.1 million. That's not too shabby. If you're consistently earning an average 8% rate of return. That sounds pretty sweet, right? Well, until you factor in inflation. In tomorrow's dollars, that 1.1 million is roughly 400,000 or about 15 grand a year to live on for the average person. That's not exactly the lavish retirement that your parents might have envisioned for themselves or for you. The old save 10% rule simply isn't enough to keep pace with the cost of living and the longevity that we now expect. So with that being said, what's the new rule? Well, automate a 20% savings floor. You're like, well, that's impossible. Well, no, it's not, but it does typically take some changes and some sacrifice. So what's the new rule? Well, automate a 20% savings floor if you can do that, and then chase the earnings velocity. So first, double down on your savings, make 20% of your income disappear into investments before you ever see it, the whole pay yourself first concept. But here's the real game changer. Focus on increasing your income. Negotiating a $10,000 raise beats skipping lattes by a mile, right? Every single time. Every extra grand you earn, invest 70% of it before lifestyle creep ever has a chance to set in. Don't let your spending expand to meet your new income. That's the biggest, that's the whole keeping up with the Joneses concept. And it's really the problem, especially a lot of younger investors tend to fall into. Just don't let your spending expand as your income grows. Save it. Save more of it. The true accelerant to wealth isn't just disciplined savings, it's equity. Think restricted stock, growing a startup, profit sharing in a successful company, crafting a private deal with that first side hustle you built. Savers stay safe and accumulate slow. Owners, those who have a piece of the pie, tend to get wealthy. And that's not to say that's going to work for everybody, but look, life is about risk. And that's why people who tend to take more risk make more money and become more wealthy. I don't know a single person that on the day they died, laying on their deathbed said, gee, I wish I wouldn't have taken as much risk. You just don't see it, okay? So it's about shifting from kind of being a wage earner to an owner, even if it's in small ways. That doesn't mean you have to go own your own business, so to speak, but it's taking ownership of your ability to save and what that looks like, even if you're working a W-2 job, okay? All right, so what about the old rule of investing is only for the rich? Well, I think we all kind of know that's an old rule, right? It used to be a lot of people would say, well, stocks are just gambling, right? It's like going to the casino, so just buy CDs, invest them long-term, and you'll be fine. Well, the reality is this fear of the stock market is a common one. It's passed down generationally because there's people who've lived through market crashes. They've lacked easy access to diversified investments. For many of our parents, CDs were the place to feel safe, predictable, and at one time even offer some decent returns. But let's just compare, right? From 1993 to 2023, the S&P 500's total return turned every dollar invested into more than $11. Over that same span, 6-month CDs barely doubled. your parents feared 1987 or the dot-com bust, you should be fearing 2040 groceries if you don't grow your money. The biggest risk isn't per se market volatility if you're managing it right. It's the erosion of your purchasing power through inflation if your money sits there and does nothing, which I find more often than not. So what's really the new rule? Well, it's not really new. It's been around for a long time, but dollar cost average into a total market ETF starting with maybe $25, right? The barriers to entry for investing have really vanished. You don't need a broker in a fancy suit or massive initial capital. Apps today slice shares into thousandths, making investing acceptable for almost everybody. Capital is no longer a gatekeeper. Really, time is. The earlier you start, the more compound interest works its magic. You set it, you forget it, so to speak, raise the auto transfer every time you get a raise, and you never sell until the index hits your target multiple of 25 times your annual expenses. Now, I'll make one caveat here. I said never sell. I do have exceptions to that rule, okay? Because our office does manage very tactically. And so, we do not recommend investing under the assumption that U.S. markets will always do what U.S. markets have always done. Obviously, the headwinds we have today look very differently than what they did 60, 70, 80 years ago in some cases. But in general, you want a consistent dollar cost averaging in, and you want to keep that growing, how much you're putting in as your income expands, okay? So index investing isn't gambling per se. Refusing to participate in the growth of the global economy kind of is gambling, right? Because it's going to happen whether you choose to participate in it or not. Do I need to say that again? This can be applied to a lot of areas of life. There are a lot of people who don't do things because they just don't believe in it and they don't want to participate in it. And if that's a moral bad thing, totally get that. But when it comes to just making smart financial decisions, the fact that you don't want to participate because you have a fear or a bias on the front end of what that thing is doesn't make it wrong, right? It just makes it something you don't want to participate in, and that could be hurting you long term. So keep that in mind. Really, if you think of just this index investing concept, it's the simplest, most effective way for any person to average, it's really the simplest way for the average person to build serious wealth. Okay, you don't have to have a lot of business acumen and sense to necessarily go as an average investor and just consistently put money in over time and let your wealth grow. And it's something that your parents really never had access to, at least not as easy as it is today. Okay. And so a lot of times the barrier to entry for them was in large measure why they viewed it as something that was bad. All right. So here we are. If this is already making your head spin, don't worry. There's actually more of these rules, things your parents never told you about money. There are more of them, but I'm going to wait and give that to you in the next video. I hope you found this helpful. Click on the comments, give us a like down below. Let us know which one of these rules, or maybe more than one of these rules, you maybe grew up thinking, and what maybe how you'd like to change those. But on the next video, we'll go through the balance of some of these things that your parents never told you about money, and look forward to talking to you next time. Until then, this is Chris Wootton, Wootton Financial Group, giving you clear direction for retirement. Take care, guys.